Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So where were we? We were at, when I originally asked you the question, you actually problematized my question. And talked about how if it turned into the politics of docupoetics, then it might not allow for other poets of witness to come in. You mentioned Carolyn Forshé and what she went through coming back to the U.S. after having written The Country Between Us. Do you remember that conversation, or anything that you had thought about? It's okay if you didn't.
No. I don't.
That's fine.
I don't remember. I mean, I think that the presence of the term docupoetics provides another avenue for thinking of a kind of witnessing that poetry can be doing, and the docupoetics, taking documents and being a mode of poetry that is set on creating a document, creating a kind of archive, drawing on an archive, making a space for found materials and news clippings and interviews and histories, right? So now there's this term for a kind of poetry that engages with the archives and the documents and the material of our world, and that can be a mode of witness, right? Some of the very early people who we now bring into the world of docupoetry, Muriel Rukeyser would be an excellent example of that. She was an activist, and part of what she was doing with her documentary poetry was reporting on the experience of these struggles of the people around her in the 1930s. And so we could call that a poetry of witness, because she was witnessing the economic struggles, many of which were linked to questions of big oil. And so she was witnessing these kind of economic hardships and social, political, labor struggles of the people around her, and that could very easily fall into the fold of poetics of witness, but it's also incorporated into the fold of docupoetry. Carolyn Forshé, again, very frequently, both in The Country Between Us, that book that really helped to propel the idea of poetry of witness in the American consciousness, but also her next book, which drew on interviews and research and archival research in France, right? Those were both books of witness, but they are also books that drew on documents and histories and material to help support, when I talk about research, the importance of really having a strong foundation for your work, that it's not just like, I watched a news article and I felt really sad about the people in whatever place that I don't know anything really about. It's about figuring out what you can know about that the witnessing really has to be deep, and it has to be, you have to be involved.
Yeah, so what I mean, and so just to echo back, what I'm hearing is that there obviously are many modes, many ways in which to witness.
Correct.
And one is maybe from outside in almost a journalistic research way that deepens your knowledge based on empathy, but requires both. And one would be from within the community. And so for like a poem from within the community, what's the impact of the history of the community on the poem? I'm thinking of your poem, Frequently Asked Questions, and how there, as I read it, there are these echoes of lynching by hanging within the action of comforting an infant, because there's this swaying. but I may be influenced too by my reading of Strange Fruit previously, right? But do you think that, what's the role of history within a community? Or the importance of history within a community to poetry of witness?
If we're looking at my poem, Frequently Asked Questions number 7, where I'm in the back of an airplane with my daughter. And I think I'm going to say I am in the back of the airplane with my daughter. I'm not going to say the speaker of the poem is in the back of the airplane, because I think one of the things that happens with poetry of witness is actually very frequently the claiming of the witness. Like the I is present, and I have experienced something, and I have witnessed something. I am the creator of this poem, and I am the creator of this statement that I'm making, that I'm witnessing. So I think that is a fairly important thing to think about, is where the stance of your poetic I is. If you're going to have like the poet speaker, which very frequently has this distant, not involved, not implicated, not complicit, not part of the situation. Somebody just like, somehow I just woke up this morning and this poem was here. Which is a way that poetry can be written, right? And I'm not necessarily bad-mouthing it, because there are certain times in which that sort of remove is necessary. But in my opinion, for poetry of witness, the poet is witnessing. The poet is making very careful decisions about what they say and how they say it and why they say it, and that it's the poet's present. So I am in the back of this airplane with my daughter when the steward, the flight attendant, has this response to her that takes him back to another time in American history, and in Black American history specifically. And the crossover between the words that we use for a boat, the galley and the steward, and these words that we've used for the aircraft, right? That's an important blur that I, as the poet, use, so that this kind of middle passage overlay would be there. And all the other violences that have happened to Black bodies, simply for being Black bodies, are certainly present in that poem. And so my kind of flying back and forth across the country in this kind of privileged way to be able to sort of move around the country was complicated and made sort of difficult, and into it entered this other experience. And I was sort of drawn to witness. I was drawn to see the suffering that is tied to my history, and the suffering that the flight attendant also was pulled into, and that I am then sharing with all the readers as well. And so witnessing doesn't, to me, necessarily have to do with something that I turned around and see immediately at this moment. Bringing into the now historical traumas, many of which still affect our day-to-day lives and the kinds of decisions that we can make and do make. That is another very important kind of witnessing. And I think it shows up very frequently in docupoetics and poetry of witness, and this kind of poetry that we're talking about is a direct engagement with history as much as a direct engagement with current events.